Hey everyone, this is Stuart, Victor Echo 9, Charlie Foxtrot, and welcome back to the POTA Performers playlist on our YouTube channel. We bring in folks from around the POTA community to kind of talk about their experience and what they're doing, what works, what doesn't work, all that usual good stuff. And today, I got a relatively new guy who just ran across last week. Devon joins us from, he's in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario right now, but kind of lives in Northern Ontario. And Sault Ste. Marie is considered Northern Ontario too, but way up in the northern part of Ontario, up in the Thunder Bay area. Devon, VE3, Fox, Oscar, Julia joins us today. Devon, welcome to our YouTube channel.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I just ran across you last week for the first time. I was checking the spot page and I was spinning around. And you had a great signal here to New Brunswick. So you were out doing some POTA, and lucky enough, I found out afterwards that you also were doing Wide Flora and Fauna. So thanks for that. But before we get into your POTA journey, tell us a little bit how you got in, a little bit of yourself and how you got into ham radio.
I'm an electrician's apprentice right now up in Thunder Bay. I'm about to complete my apprenticeship. That's what I'm in Sault Ste. Marie for right now. Doing my last round of trade school, which will be done in 4 weeks, and then I'll write the big test, and hopefully I'll be a journeyman. Fingers crossed. My start into ham radio was actually a YouTube video about the Newelec SDR dongle. And I was watching this guy talk about how he could use this dongle to receive images from weather satellites. I thought that was pretty cool. It's something to play around with. And these dongles weren't all that expensive. So I picked one up and I did the whole vertical V dipole or horizontal V dipole. Tried to receive some satellites, received some very poor quality images, but they're good enough quality to get me hooked. Experimented around with building antennas for satellite work, receiving satellite work. And then after I kind of got over that, I got into, I was just using the SDR to scan around, right? Just seeing what I could see. I initially was just listening to cab companies, construction companies, the airport, stuff like that. And then I ran into these strange signals up around 146 in that range. Guys seem to be just chatting with each other, and I looked it up online, and ham radio, it said, so okay. And then I started going down that rabbit hole and got into the whole HF side of things, bought the down converter or up converter, whatever it is, for the SDR dongle, mag loop antenna, started listening to more of the HF frequencies. And that's kind of what really got me hooked into it, was the idea that I could use this radio to communicate with the world with no need of infrastructure or anything. I thought that was pretty cool. And plus there is a certain mystique about ham radio operators, right? So I started looking into what I needed to actually do, how I could get a radio, what radio I could use. I ended up picking up just a 2-meter Chinese radio. I forget what it was, something cheap, Anytone or something like that. Picked up one of those, and I was initially gonna, no word of a lie, I was initially going to run as a pirate station sort of thing. And then I decided I better not do that because these guys are pretty smart and I'll get busted quick. I looked into my license. I got the license, got on 2 meters, started doing more satellite work, actually transmitting satellites. And that's kind of how that really got me hooked into it. I loved my first DX contact was over satellite to a fellow in Mexico. I could barely hear him. He could barely hear me. Our window of communication was like 30 seconds. But at that point, I looked into getting an HF radio. I picked up Zygo G90, which is I think most people's starter HF radio, I think anyway. Picked up the Zygo G90 and I was off from there. That's how I got my start into POTA and everything too.
That's great, man. I know a lot of people that have that radio. I don't have one personally myself. I like something with a little bit more oomph behind it. But because I run power and when I do out and do POTA, I'm running 250, 300 watts. And my buddy Keith, who lives in New Hampshire, he runs 600. So I'm envious. I do have a lead on a 500 watt amplifier for portable out of a guy in Edmonton that I may just pick up for he said it's been sitting on his shelf for 25 years, so he's willing to sell it for whatever I offer him. So I've got to figure out what I'm going to offer him to him for something fair, of course. You started using this SDR. You found out all these cool things. I mean, a lot of the guys that come on this program talk about their roots being in shortwave listening or 11 meters. You kind of, a little bit of the modern day shortwave listener story, right? SDR, listen to cab companies, airports, and you found out about all this cool stuff on HF. I really I want to get into satellite myself. I've never dabbled in that before. I was going to threaten to do that this year if my solar company couldn't repair my solar system, which lucky enough they did on Friday. So my noise on 20 meters is not all gone, but significantly reduced by 95%. If I turn the beam towards where the panels are, I get a little bit of noise, but again, it's nothing like it was. Anyway, so I want to get into satellite. I want to get a radio for that. I got some spare antenna parts that I can easily build a Yagi for that. So I'm interested to learn more about that down the road. But you got into POTA. Looking at your QRZ page, you got some pretty cool places you go to. Tell me a little about you're getting, how did you stumble upon POTA? What tweaked your interest with it? And let's go from there.
POTA was kind of my foothold into HF, right? Because I got the HF radio. I got my license first of all. I got with honors, so I had access to the HF bands. And then I get on the air. I build the first antenna I ever built was a 20-meter half-wave dipole. Build that thing, get it up in the air, get on the air. And then now it's kind of like I'm on HF. I'm very mic shy. I don't really know who to talk to, what to talk about. I wanted to talk to someone, but I didn't want to make a fool of myself. And I'm sitting there listening, and I hear these POTA stations, Parks on the Air, and I'm listening to the sorts of contacts that are being made. And it's just a very quick, well, you know what it is, a very quick signal report, goodbye sort of thing. So that was kind of a way for me to dip my toes in without making a fool of myself, right? I was able to start into actually transmitting. And then once I had made contact with these stations a couple times, the thought occurred to me, well, I could do this. I could go out and start activating, and it's an excuse for me to get out of the house. It's an excuse for me. It's a reason for me to be able to transmit. It's a lot easier to get on the air if you have a so-called reason to get on the air, right? I found, anyways, that was kind of my start into POTA, was a way to get past that mic shyness in all reality.
Yeah, and Rich V1 our production talked about that in a recent interview about POTA being the exact reason for getting over the mic shyness. And I mean, a lot of guys have been in that that predicament where you are too, where even me, like I was in marketing most of my career, ran IT services company marketing and owned a couple marketing agencies. And get this, for a marketing owner, I was very much an introvert. I can turn on the extrovert part of me when I had to, when I was either talking to a crowd of people from a stage or in a group in my career. But once I switched off my career, I was very much an introvert. So I know exactly where you are. And that's how, when I got into ham radio, I didn't feel right just having a conversation to anyone about anything, right? So I got into contesting. That was my first thing. Got into contesting and DXing, because with DXers, they got a big pile up and they just give a signal report and they're gone too, right? And you mentioned your story with the Mexican satellite contact. You only had a 30-second window. Signal report, go. I mean, you don't have time to ask him how his hip surgery went, right? So,
exactly.
You don't have that time. You don't have that luxury. And the DXers the same way. And contesters are signal report, exchange, go, right? I think the Ontario QSO party was this weekend. I'm not sure. I have to double check that. POTA is kind of a blend. My friends, I can't remember his name now. Stanley, Sean, Scott. Wait, actually, just joking. Stuart Hayes, V3RGO. We just joke about nobody can remember our name. Tells me that POTA's the non-contest contest. So it has contest-like characteristics. So you could, operate like I do, 5-9 next, 5-9 next, 5-7 next, right? Or if you are a sociable type of person, you can have a 30, 60, 2-minute long QSO with somebody, and it doesn't upset anyone. You get into POTA, and you're basically, I think you said you're hunting stations first, and you said, hey, I can do this myself. So tell me about your first activation. And don't we all have stories and memories of our first activation? Tell me about your first activation, because if you're like me, you don't know what you don't know.
No, my first activation was Kekabeka Falls in Thunder Bay. I decided I was going to get on the air, and I was really, really anxious about going to this park and setting up this huge antenna. Because I was running the half-wave dipole, setting up this huge antenna, having all this radio gear. I was worried that someone was going to come and be like, hey, what are you doing? Sort of thing. I have had that happen, but it's never as bad as you think it's going to be. I was really anxious about it, so I got a hold of the park manager in Kekabeka Falls, and asked her, like, well, do you mind if I do this? And she went through, well, what are you going to do? You're not going to set up any permanent antennas. No, I'm not. When I told her what I was going to do, described her setup to me, she gave me the go ahead. I ended up going to the park, I think that day or the next day, just picked a picnic table under a great big birch tree, threw up at that time, in order to get my antenna up in there, I had a weight tied onto the end of a nylon rope, threw it over the tree, tried to throw it over the tree about 100 times before I actually managed to get it over the tree, sort of thing. Got the antenna up on the air, got on the air, and I think that first activation, I think I made about 46 contacts, which completely blew my mind, because prior to this, I was doing all the satellite work, and a good day doing satellite satellite work for me was like 5 contacts maybe and a single pass. So I get this activation and I get these 50 or 46, whatever it was, contacts. And that just blew my mind. I was hooked right there. And went and did Quebec a couple more times before I kind of expanded out from there into other parks.
And I know that you're doing a lot of, you just introduced Wide Flora and Fauna into your activations recently. You can go back to all your old POTA logs and send those in too, just so you can do that. As long as you have you don't even need the 44 QSOs in one outing. You can roll that over a period of time. So there's no strict rules, say 44 or else, right? You can do 10 one day, 20 the next day, and go back and do your 14 on your third visit. So there's no requirement to get all your 44 in one outing. But we'll talk about that in a second. So you get out there, you go to Quebec Falls. Actually, did you ever run it? There's a couple other guys in Thunder Bay, Barry, Irwin, I can't remember what it's called, and there's another guy that I think they're pretty active in POTA, although I haven't seen them much over the winter. Again, not too many POTA guys are active in the winter in Canada, but I'm sure you ran across those guys.
Yeah, we went and did a couple of. They seem to have their own little group there. Barry, Brad, another fella whose name I'm forgetting, and it's really embarrassing. So you might watch his video. They had their own little group together, and they're very welcoming, very inviting. Asked me to come out with them. I was still very, very new at the time, so I appreciated it. We went out. We did a couple activations together. Brad and I did Wilmette Canyon. Barry, Brad, and the other guy. We ended up doing La Vérendrye Provincial Park, which is no longer a provincial park, so you can't activate it anymore. But yeah, I did a couple activations with those guys. Good guys, really good guys.
Yeah, and I know Barry and Brad, but I like the third person. I can't even remember who it is. So don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. But I know Barry and Brad because I've worked them numerous times here from New Brunswick. So okay, so you got your feet wet with Parks on the Air. I'm noticing on your QRZ page, you've got some pretty interesting places you go to. Just like Gary, VA3 Golf Hotel Bravo, who is in the where's the Barry now, north of Toronto, Halliburton area. That's where he's at. He goes out and does a lot of parks in the Muskokas in that area. You got the same type of environment where you are. A lot of great remote locations in northwestern Ontario. Tell me about that. How do some of these locations you get to, they're not easy to get into by the looks of the pictures.
Not at all. As I got more into POTA, because up there, as you said yourself, there's a lot of unactivated parks. That became my thing. I wanted to stamp my name, be the first activator for the park, right? So I started doing that with, of course, the closest parks first, and then we ran out of close parks. And then my only option was I had to get out to these conservation areas and wilderness areas and whatnot else. And it was kind of a point in my life where I was transitioning from I had spent all my time inside playing video games throughout most of my 20s. And I played so many video games, I got over video games sort of thing. So I was looking for an excuse to get out anyway. And so I think one of the first ones that I did, one of the first difficult ones that I did was Devon Road Mesa. And I found it on the map. I looked at where it was. I looked at it on Google Maps, planning everything out. How am I going to access this place? And it looked like there was this old logging road that kind of got close to the park. So I ended up driving out Devon Road. I got to this old logging road and I noticed it was just super grown in. I started walking. I had all my gear on my back. Started walking down this grown in old road, and it got to a point where this park was on top of, it's Devon Road Mesa. It was on top of a mesa, and I could see this hill, giant hill basically beside me, and this road's going off that way. So I just struck out across country, through a swamp, luckily a dried up swamp, up the side of the mesa, up on top of the hill, did an activation up there. I remember on that occasion, I ended up talking to a bunch of Boy Scouts too, and they're asking me, "Oh, what's your favorite hockey team up in Canada?" I was like, "I don't watch hockey." But anyways, finished up that activation. That was kind of like my first remote, I guess you could say, activation. Learned a couple of good lessons up there as well. Like I ended up on my way back down, I ended up getting a little bit lost. Not really lost because I knew if I just walked left, I would hit a road eventually, but lost enough that it was concerning. It was kind of a realization that when you're walking into a place through the bush, you think you'll be able to turn around, walk right back out because you've already walked there, right? It should all look familiar. That's not the case. You turn around and everything looks completely different, right? Because you're looking at it from the other way. But anyways, that was my first kind of remote activation. And from there, it was kind of a mix of I want to get out and do things. I want to get out and hike, but I also want to get out and be the first one on these parks. So I started looking at some of the more remote parks like Little Greenwater, which I actually failed to activate because I never got in there. But I'd look for parks that had a little bit of access to them. They weren't like there was no road directly in, but there'd be a road nearby sort of thing. So I could drive 80% of the way there and then hike in. If it was like under 5 kilometers hike, even if it's through the bush, whatever, I'd do that, throw my pack on my back, get my GPS, get my compass, the way I'd go. Yeah, that's was kind of the start of my whole remote location thing. And it's that aspect of the hobby for me has never died down. If anything, it's only intensified because I want to find more remote locations.
And for me as a hunter, I really appreciate guys like you doing that because I often joke around with the guys from the U.S. that there's so many parks in the U.S. There's a couple that just seem everybody goes to every single day. It's on the air. And I know there's a handful of guys like me we focus on. I think that's why I got attracted to or got noticed you on the air because you had this park in Ontario that showed up on my list of, hey, Stuart, you don't got this one yet. So I think that's when I tuned in around and found you. There's a bunch of me, Foxtrot 5, Papa Yankee, India, Sugar Mike 3, November Radio Yankee. There's a bunch of guy, Whiskey 9, Alpha Victor, Clinton, I think he's in Wisconsin or Illinois. These guys they hunt new parks. Mm-hmm. So we appreciate that. And your story about, going in and then coming back, the military taught me that at a young age, that the way in always looks different the way coming back because of light situation changes. Things look different morning to afternoon to twilight. You need to properly prepare when you go to these locations. And Gary and I talked about that too, about notifying people that, hey, I'm going to be here today. Here's where I'm going to plan to get to, just in case I don't come back. And there's a few places in New Brunswick that I'm looking at hitting this year too. Same story. There's a wind farm about an hour or so from my house here in New Brunswick. You can drive up 95% of the way and park at the wind farm office and then hike into this conservation area. Just make sure you have plenty of bug spray. That's what they tell us because the bugs are terrible out there. And we did a few islands in the Bay of Fundy, and it's a lot of fun I like to go to places, and I'd like to get your opinion on this because it sounds like you're along the same lines as many of us. Programs like Parks on the Air, Wide Flora and Fauna afford us the opportunity to go to places that we normally wouldn't have gone to out of the blue. Like you mentioned, you're a video gamer in your 20s, and I was a CEO of a marketing agency. So I never had time to do this stuff. And Parks on the Air afforded us the opportunity now, Wide Flora and Fauna the same, to get out and see things we normally wouldn't have saw.
Yeah, I thought about this too in past. My whole perspective on it is the radio thing. I love doing radio stuff, but in all reality, what it boils down to at the end of the day is it's an excuse for me to go check out these locations. Because if I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking about, I'd like to go somewhere, I'm not going to go to some remote wilderness place unless I have a reason to go there, right? POTA provides the reason to go there. Wildlife, Flora and Fauna provides the reason to go there. Don't get me wrong. I love doing the radio stuff. I love working pileups in particular, but it's kind of half of the inspiration to go is POTA, half the inspiration to go is just I would want to go somewhere. You know what I mean?
100%. Nick. I mean, I've done 600, 700, maybe 800 activations. I haven't checked recently. And I'm always looking for new ways to, what's the word I'm looking for here? Just keep my interest peaked at the 100%. So now for me is I love to go places and learn about the history or go somewhere that, needs a bit of a challenge to get to, or take an antenna that I built here in the shack and take it out in the field and test it. I just don't want to go do Parks on the Air or Flora and Fauna or any program just for the sake of just going out. If I wanted to do that, I could just go to my local one and do that over and over and over. And there's nothing wrong with that, Devon. Not at all. There's lots of people in all the programs that's what they do. They just like to get out because either they got high noise level at their house, or if they're in the U.S., they're infected with the HOA virus, and they can't put up antennas. Right? Yeah. We're lucky in Canada. We don't have that problem yet. Hopefully, hope it never happens. They have there's some restrictions that they can't do it at their local house, at their local premises. So Parks on the Air affords them, even if it's just their local park down the street. So I noticed a couple things since our first encounter last week. So I was very surprised to see you uploaded your logs to Wide Flora and Fauna. So thanks again for doing that. Really appreciate it. That actually got me my 225 unique parks with Wide Flora and Fauna for Canada.
Perfect.
Award. So thank you for that. And thanks to the guys at CY0 Zero S the other day for getting their logs in for flora and fauna, so they're uploaded now too. So I mean, I hunt POTA and I hunt worldwide flora and fauna. I do both. I'm neither one is any priority or another. Whatever I can hear, right? But I like to do new parks. That's my thing. So how did you find out about flora and fauna? Because it's Canada's best ham radio secret, I think.
I'd kind of heard some of them on the air when I very, very first got into the hobby. I heard people saying, you know how you go through your QSO and the end of your QSO is 73. I heard these people saying 44. I looked into it, what the heck is that? And it came up 4 seasons associated with flora and fauna. So it was in my brain. I never really looked into it, but I become aware of it pretty early on in my radio career, I guess you could say. And then it was like 2-3 weeks ago. That's when I first started this flora and fauna stuff. I was just online. I think I had just done a POTA activation, or I was looking into doing a POTA activation, and I forget what I was looking at, but something came up, flora and fauna, and it kind of clicked in my brain. Oh yeah, that exists. So I typed it up online, just interested in it. I'm at my parents' place right now, and it's nice to be able to get out and do things on my own, sort of thing. But I looked into flora and fauna at the time 2-3 weeks ago, and I began to realize, I looked at their entity map. Okay, so are there any of these flora and fauna entities around me that I can look into, that I can do? And I began realizing, okay, it was North Shore Channel, Lake Huron North Shore Channel. It was a POTA activation, it was also a flora and fauna activation, or maybe it was the other one I did that day too. But anyways, whatever POTA activation I was planning on doing, I realized it was also a flora and fauna activation. So at that point, I was like, well, if they're the same entity, the same park, the same everything, and I'm going there anyways, I might as well do both activations. So that's really how it started. I'm very, like I said, this is 3 weeks ago, so I'm very, very new to this, but that's where it began so far.
And you're 100% right. You're there already. You know, it doesn't hurt to just do another reference. I think you said you use hammers, right? So I think in hammers, in my early days before I switched to Ham 2K Polo, hammers allowed you to put the flora and fauna reference in, and it created the log anyways. So it would be like treated like a 2-fer or a 3-fer, like POTA type thing. Again, I think that worked. I don't quote me on that, but it was my friend Steve V1SK that told me about Polo, and I haven't looked at hammers ever since. So I really don't know what's changed since I got off of the program. It does have its limitations, like I said. Only Apple is the way to go with those ones, right? So not for everyone, but anyway. But the POTA, the one thing I like about programs like Polo is that if you were in the spot, it'll find the local references. Like Hammers does that as well for POTA, right? You can, hey, you're right. You're at Charlie Alpha 1 2 3 4, right? Because your GPS on your phone is telling you that's where you're at. These other programs do the same thing for other programs. So hey, again, thanks for jumping in on the flora and fauna. I wish more Canadian hams would that are doing POTA would also co-activate flora and fauna. I know there's me and Peter here on the East Coast. Rich V1RPX does it in Nova Scotia. There's a couple guys in Quebec, a couple guys in Ontario, and a couple guys out west. So there's a small group of us, but it's always nice to have more. So, and then I saw you're also doing the Rack Challenge as well. That's great. I saw you on the leaderboard this one.
Yeah, it's also new, same time as flora and fauna. I was aware of the Rack Challenge thing. The guy actually got a hold of me when I was doing Wilmette Canyon activation, Thunder Bay on my own. One of the Rack guys actually got a hold of me and said, "Hey, listen, you can upload this stuff to the Rack website for the challenge." And at the time, I was like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." It was all about POTA for me. But now, again, about the same time, I was looking into flora and fauna. I was looking at other excuses to get out and go do stuff, and I remembered this Rack Challenge. I was like, I should have been uploading all of my logs all along. But now I just recently started doing that.
And it's real simple. It's real simple to do. It's just it's a few steps, but just put your park references in and your grid squares. And you mentioned that Mesa that you were at. That I don't know if you thought about that. Could also have been a soda reference. I'm not sure if you knew about that.
It was, and I had it. I was gonna upload it as a soda, and then I lost the log or something. So yeah,
I'm not too familiar with soda. I've never ventured into it. In my late 50s and my physical conditioning, I'm not hiking up any mountains anytime soon. Or even what we have here in New Brunswick that are really not mountains, or because living in Alberta, those are mountains, but they're they call them mountains out here, but they're really just big hills. So, but that's cool. So anyway, it's nice to run across you at the end of the air. I'm on the air, and that's why I saw your QRZ page, and so I got to reach out to this guy because he's got some pretty cool places he's gone to. In your short time doing parks on the air and Flora and Fauna and all the other programs, what is your most memorable experience so far?
White Otter Lake, hands down. White Otter Lake was just amazing. I went out and spent a week there just camping. I sick as a dog. I'd planned this trip for 6 months ahead of time, booked time off work, everything. Of course, the week before I go out to do this trip, I get sick. And the guys at work are saying, well, maybe you should put it off for a week or two and do it when you're not sick. And I just, nope, I'm doing it next week. That's how it is. And we're going. So I went out, packed up my canoe, everything, my canoe, my camping gear, my radio, battery, solar panel, all of it, all into my truck, canoe onto the top of the truck, drove out to White Otter Lake, planned on staying the night at the boat launch and then paddling out the next day. Couldn't do that because there was no room. So 9 o'clock at night, sun's starting to think about going down. I'm loading up my canoe, sick as ever, paddling out onto this lake, and paddling across the lake to an island. Ended up setting up my tent in a swamp, being attacked by mosquitoes, got the tent up just as the sun was going down. That first night, I'll never forget sitting there outside of my tent. The sun has just gone down. It's all dark. On this island across the bay on this island, there's another group of people camping there, and I'm sitting there listening to their music, drinking beer, and just thinking, this is fantastic. I remember when I got to that boat launch, I thought, I don't know if am I actually going to do this? Like, this is a little bit nuts. I've done some stuff, but I've never done anything like this. This is a little bit nuts. I did it. I'm glad. And then the next day from that swamp, I ended up paddling up from the bottom end of White Otter Lake up to an island about midway. Set up my tent, all my gear, I set it up on this island. I ended up camping on that island for a week. There were 9 days in total, I think it was, that I was out there. Camping out on this island for 9 days. And it was Sunday, I got there, got my tent set up. It was kind of a wash. Not much I could do that day. All said and done once I got to the island, got set up. One day, I couldn't paddle out to the park. The park on the lake that I was going there to activate is White Otter Castle. There's a lot of history there. Not a lot, but there's some history there. It's really, really cool history. You should look into it if you get an opportunity. But that was the whole goal, to get up to this White Otter Castle park. And it's also a three-story structure that I really wanted to see. But Monday, I couldn't get up there because it rained all day. That was another important lesson. It rained all day. And then Tuesday, I go to make my morning coffee. And because it had poured all day and night the next day, or the previous day, how do I start a fire? Right? Everything's soaked. I did get a fire going. It took me 2 hours. I was sitting there, I kind of went through the thought process of, okay, I can't, all the wood's wet, all the birch bark's wet, everything's wet. So how do I start a fire? Well, the only place that there's going to be dry wood around here is in the center of a log. So I ended up cutting up a tree, got a billet of wood, split it open, split it up, got this fire going anyways. That was Monday. And the realization there was, if you're going to rely on a campfire to cook and whatnot, you need to have a dry stash of wood somewhere, exactly for that reason. And then Tuesday, I didn't end up going. I think the weather wasn't great. Wednesday, I woke up super early. The lake was flat, calm. I decided, okay, today's the day. We're going to the castle. So I got my gear bag. I had a water filter, so I filtered 4 liters of water, threw that into my canoe. Radio and antenna, everything into the canoe. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm off across the lake, paddling up. I was only about halfway across the lake where I camped. Like I mentioned, the castle and the park were at the northern end of the lake, so I still had a lot to go. I hammered down, paddled all morning, all the way up the lake, it used to be the west side of the lake. The east side is more exposed, and at that section of lake, it's pretty open. And I've heard and experienced, but that's later in the story, heard that this lake can get real nasty. So I stuck to the west side of the lake that was less exposed, lots of islands and whatnot. Paddle up that way, and I'll never forget coming around one island, looking off to the right, and it's incredible. You just see a wall of green trees, and then out of this wall, there's this red spot. And as you get closer, you realize that that's the castle. It's the roof of the castle. You get closer and it comes more into view, more into definition. Paddled right up to it. And when I got there, a bunch of Boy Scouts from America had pulled up at the same time, which was, I mean, they were there for the same reason I was, check the place out, but I kind of hoped I'd have the place to myself sort of thing to give it a good check out. But I get there anyways, these like 20 of these kids all running around. Oh, look at all this is cool. And I get out of my canoe and get to the castle. You pull up on a beach, and the first thing you're struck by is the castle itself. It's such an incredible structure. It's a 3-story log building with a 4-story turret attached to it. The guy, Jimmy McHewitt, built himself entirely by himself, cut the wood himself, built the structure himself, portaged in windows and stove and door and roofing all himself to build this structure. There's a whole bunch of history there. I won't go into it. It's I guess not the purpose of this. But I get up there, I see the structure, I get off onto the beach, I look over and there's a grave, which is Jimmy himself. He ended up 4 years after he finished building his castle, he got tangled up in one of his fishing nets and drowned. The M&R buried him at his castle. So I went and saw Jimmy, paid my respects, and then went in, checked out the castle, which is really cool. There's not much going on inside. There's no furniture or nothing, but just the structure itself is incredible. And the thought that one person built it by himself is just mind blowing. But get up and I check out all the floors, each floor. I get up into the turret, check out the turret. There's all sorts of information plaques. I read through all of those. Got out. There's a guest book. I signed the guest book. And then my original plan was I was going to set up my antenna right there at the castle. But because of all these Boy Scouts and people it's a very popular place. People are always coming to check it out. First of all, I didn't think it would be very respectful of me to set up my gear there. And also, I didn't really want a bunch of people constantly coming and asking me what I was doing. So I went down the beach from the castle a bit into an area which I think was an old POW camp. There is an old POW camp there somewhere. I don't know if that's where I was, but it was a wide open clearing, just these really tall red pines, just gorgeous. I ended up setting up my antenna there and doing the activation there. It wasn't a very good radio day, I guess you could say. It wasn't hard to get out, but it wasn't as easy as it usually is. I mean, I think about 42 contacts anyway. One guy from France, which I don't think he believed me. I told him where I was. He's asking all these questions. Oh yeah, and how'd you get there? Canoe. Oh, and what sort of radio are you using? I told him all this, and he said, "Well, can you send me some pictures?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can send you some pictures," and I did, and I never got any reply from him. But anyway, that my QRZ profile picture is the picture of a face carved into a log that was at that POW site there. But yeah, ended up doing the activation. And as I'm sitting there, I get my 40 contacts or my 42 contacts or whatever, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking off to the north end of the lake, and I can see these really, really dark clouds rolling in. And I'd been told several times, don't underestimate that lake because it can go from flat calm to absolutely devastating in the blink of an eye. So I saw these clouds rolling in. I panicked to get all my gear taken down, antenna down, all my gear packed up, and did one of the dumbest things I possibly could have done. I decided I was going to get in my canoe and try to outrun the thunderstorm, which didn't happen. The thunderstorm was much quicker than I am. I should have just, in all honesty, paddled back to the castle and stayed there, waited out the storm there. But I ended up paddling across the lake, trying to get back to my campsite, and this thunderstorm comes in, catches me in the middle of the lake, and in the matter of 15 minutes, that lake went from calm to about 2-foot waves while I'm in my canoe. Scared the absolute bejesus out of me. I ended up going to shore, pulling my canoe up on shore, flipping the canoe upside down, stashing all my gear underneath it, hiding underneath the canoe, just in absolute panic, because in that point in time I was thinking, well, if I end up stuck here for the night, I'm not going to be able to start a fire because everything's wet. I don't have any sort of tent. I don't have any sort of warm clothing. I might be in kind of a bad situation here. But the storm actually moved on pretty quickly. Storm went away, the lake went calm again, and I ended up kind of chasing the storm back to my camp. Made it back to my island that night. A little bit shocked for the whole storm situation washing me up, but at the same time, I don't really regret it because it was an amazing experience, absolutely incredible. And spent the rest of the week there. Thursday, Friday came along. I started getting a little bit homesick, thinking about my cat, of course. And Saturday, I ended up paddling back out. Nice, beautiful, calm day. Paddled out. Got back to the boat launch. Met a bunch of M&R guys. They interrogated me for my license and wanted to see I had all the proper bailing bucket, which I did, of course. Got everything loaded up, and away I went. Back home. It was 9 days, 9 of the most incredible days of my life.
It sounds great. Actually, looking at your QRZ page when you're talking about and saw the picture of the castle there. That's pretty neat. Hey, Devon, we're going to wrap up here, but go and check Devon's QRZ page, VA3FOJ on QRZ. I think I may have said Victor Echo 3 in the beginning, but Victor Alpha 3, Fox Oscar Juliet. Check out his QRZ page. I'll put a link in the pinned comment below as well. Hey, Devon, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day on your Sunday to come and talk to us and sharing your insights. And that story is that's what this ham radio hobby is all about. It's just creating memories like that. Devon, thanks again, my friend. I really appreciate your being out there, doing all the stuff you do for ham radio, and taking time out to talk to us today.
Well, hey, thank you very much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Anyway, got on Stuart, Victor Echo 9, Charlie Foxtrot. Thanks again to Devon. Thanks again to all of you who watched the channel. We just make some really good videos, talk about people's experiences and good stuff like that. So we'll see you guys in the next video. I have Martin W5WPS, I think it is. I think I should know what it's called on top of my head. I only talked about a million times. He's joining us, and we have a bunch of other people coming on, Max N4TRD, and a few other adventurous type folks. And Martin is definitely an adventurous person in Arkansas, so I'm sure he'll have a few stories to tell as well as Devon. Thanks again, my friend, and we'll see you in our next episode, everyone.
Have a good one.